I was wearing my regular suit on the day of the company anniversary celebration, while my wife, Rachel, was wearing a dress she had dug out especially for the occasion. We made our way to the location. We checked in at the reception after arriving at the hotel where the party was being held. The venue's lovely decor and floral arrangements thrilled Rachel. I hoped the evening would go smoothly, and she was looking forward to the meal as well. However, my employer dashed that optimism. "Hey, Johnny. Hey, you're right there." Johnny saw me and hurried over to us, glancing at Rachel. "Is your parent standing with you? Avoid taking your mother to a business function." I grabbed Rachel's hand out of rage and uttered the simple words, "Let's go." I quickly heard footsteps running after us as we made our way to the exit. I turned to see my coworker James sprinting in our direction. He was obviously pale. A man who appeared to be in his 60s stood next to him. But the man next to James opened his mouth before I could say anything. "Rachel, is that you?" Rachel's eyes became wide with surprise. "My name is Eastwood, Tommy. I lead a nice life at home with my wife, Rachel, despite the fact that we are childless, and my job is rewarding. About 5 years ago, I got to know Rachel. Actually, I started working at my current employer just a few years ago. I had previously taught in Cambodia. That's when I met Rachel. Rachel was sent to Cambodia while she was employed by a company that offers foreign aid, mostly to underdeveloped nations. It seemed to me like a fortuitous meeting. I had never experienced romance before and had thought I would lead a life apart from marriage. I chose to work abroad for that reason. However, I was utterly enthralled with Rachel after we met. As Rachel engaged intimately with the people and smiled freely with the kids, I was instantly captivated by her charisma. Naturally, we began eating meals together, and Rachel also appeared to be aware of me. It was difficult to believe that I had never dated a woman before because it felt so natural. At first, Rachel seemed concerned that she was more than 10 years older than me, but I didn't care about the age difference at all. In fact, I was drawn to the kindness and patience that Rachel had, which younger women often lacked. When I told her this, she would smile at me happily. Even though I had met such a wonderful woman, my boss Johnny always mocked our relationship. He often made fun of the fact that my wife was more than 10 years older than me, using it as an opening to insult Rachel and get laughs. Johnny started mocking Rachel shortly after we met, 3 years ago. That day was my welcome party, and despite being a mid-career hire, almost all the employees gathered for me. Since it was a startup and still a young company, there weren't many employees. Even so, I felt reassured, thinking I could quickly get used to the warm, homely atmosphere of the workplace. My confidence started to waver when Johnny, who initially seemed friendly, gradually got drunk, and his behavior began to feel off. "Tom, you said you were married, right? Show us a picture of your wife." "Sure, but don't expect a stunning beauty like your wife, Johnny." Johnny had been bragging about how young and beautiful his wife was over and over again to his subordinates. He kept saying, "I'd rather be home with my wife than with you guys," while drunkenly gushing about her. So, I decided to play along and flatter him. Johnny seemed to enjoy our conversation, but when I showed him a picture of Rachel, he spat out his drink. "This is your wife. She's so thin. She's almost black. She looks like an African American, and she looks more like your mom than your wife. Do you call her mom when you get home?" Johnny started passing Rachel's photo around to the subordinates, making her the butt of his joke. Rachel did spend a lot of time outdoors interacting with locals, so she was quite tanned. However, being mocked for her appearance with a comment like, "She looks like an African American," was deeply upsetting. The employees, seeing Johnny's reaction, glanced at me and nodded in agreement, trying to stay on his good side. Even though they probably felt bad for me, they couldn't defy Johnny, their boss. I felt a mix of anger toward Johnny and guilt toward the other employees for putting them in such an awkward position. But it's not all about looks. I'm sure you'll understand once you meet her. I tried to keep my frustration in check as I said that. Johnny, however, made things worse. What are you talking about? I wouldn't want to meet her even if you paid me. She'd probably make me feel old. He then pulled out his smartphone and showed us a picture of his wife. The employees responded with gasps of admiration. To me, it seemed like they were just trying to stay on Johnny's good side as usual. Johnny probably bragged about his wife all the time, and the employees were likely fed up with it. Though they reacted positively, their expressions suggested they were tired of his stories. A girl has to be young and beautiful, right? Look at Tom. He's only been here a few days, but he always stays late. With a wife that unattractive, no wonder he doesn't want to go home early. Johnny laughed loudly and finished his beer as he said that. An employee nearby ordered a new drink, and Johnny nodded with satisfaction while holding his glass. I'm in management, so I can't leave early. But I'd almost trade places with Tom, who doesn't want to go home. Learn the job quickly and get promoted soon, all right. Johnny slurred, emptied his glass, and headed to the restroom. The sympathetic looks from the employees were painfully obvious. From that day on, every time Johnny saw me, he would start by mocking Rachel. Morning. You're in early again. Well, if you don't want to be at home, it's understandable. Just don't rack up too much overtime, okay? He laughed heartily and headed to his desk. Even though I enjoyed my work, every time Johnny opened his mouth, my mood would plummet. That day, while I was organizing my things, Johnny called me over. From now on, when you get in, make me coffee, he ordered, assigning me a task completely unrelated to my work. I thought this was too much and was about to protest, but then I remembered the younger employees making coffee for Johnny every morning. They probably weren't doing it voluntarily, but were ordered to, just like now. If I refused, Johnny would be upset and likely ask one of the younger employees again, which I didn't want to happen. I sighed softly and replied in a small voice, okay. I headed to the kitchen, made the coffee, and brought it to Johnny. On the way, I realized I should have asked the employee who usually made Johnny's coffee whether he took sugar or milk, but I decided to just bring it as it is and remember to ask next time. Here you go. I hope black is okay. I should have asked your preference before making it. Sorry for not checking. When I handed him the cup and said that, Johnny stared at it for a while. I was momentarily worried that he didn't like something, but I was relieved when he smiled. However, what he said next was unbelievable. This coffee is the same color as your wife. Thinking about that makes me not want to drink it. Sorry, but can you throw it away for me? With that, Johnny handed me the cup. What on earth was he saying? I forced a smile, thinking it was a joke, but Johnny pushed the cup towards me, clearly expecting me to take it. Realizing he was serious, I couldn't pull back any longer and spoke up. Isn't that extremely rude? And anyway, you should get your own drink. Please don't give me any more non-work-related orders. As I showed my anger, Johnny tried to calm me down with a smirk. Don't get so worked up. I didn't mean it as an order. You just did me a favor, right? Well, I guess I won't be drinking any coffee you make from now on, so I'll just ask someone else. I felt I might lose my temper and shout if I stayed near him any longer. To keep my composure, I returned to my seat without saying another word. However, Johnny's relentless insults didn't stop. No matter how much I tried to distance myself from him, he kept approaching me and saying things to provoke me. Tom, don't you have any kids? Well, you got married late, and you married someone as old as your mom. I guess kids are out of the question. In this day and age, anyone with common sense would find such a statement unacceptable. It seemed like Johnny either lacked that sense or was deliberately trying to hurt me. I tried to ignore it, but his words still stung. Rachel and I both love children, but as Johnny pointed out, we are indeed too old to be having kids. I can't risk Rachel's health. Although we haven't had a serious discussion about it, We both know deep down that having children might not be possible for us. That's why Johnny's words hurt me so much. It made me sad to hear them. I could feel the sympathetic looks from the nearby employees. Whether it was because of Johnny's rude behavior or seeing how deeply shocked I was, I couldn't tell. I just knew that despite being passionate about my work, I was starting to feel increasingly uncomfortable. The harassment from Johnny continued, but I stayed with the company. Sure, he often bothered me before and after work hours or during breaks, but once work started, I could immerse myself in my tasks. I was satisfied with that. Over time, I probably developed the skill to tune out anything unrelated to my work that Johnny said. Lately, I found myself getting less irritated by him. One day, Johnny asked me about the upcoming company anniversary party. "Tom, can your wife make it to the company's anniversary party this weekend?" For the 10th anniversary of the company's founding, we were allowed to invite spouses and children. Although it's now easier to start a startup company, many companies still fail and go bankrupt. It's impressive that this company has lasted 10 years and looks set to continue growing steadily. I enjoy the work itself and hope this lifestyle continues, but bringing Rachel is a different story. Thinking back on my interactions with Johnny, I'm sure Rachel would only get hurt. Johnny asking if my wife could come was probably just curiosity, but he might say something hurtful even in front of her. It's a great opportunity to invite family, but I think I'll let my wife relax at home, I said. Johnny looked surprised. "Come on, don't be so boring. Let her come and say hello at least." It was clear Johnny intended to interact with Rachel in some way. I was determined not to bring her to the party, but his next words made me waver. "Or are you saying you can't show her to us? You keep saying you love your wife, but deep down, you feel ashamed of her, don't you?" Hearing Johnny say that, I couldn't help but get defensive. "That's not true. Fine, I'll talk to my wife about it." So I ended up talking to Rachel at the company anniversary party when I got home. I asked her right away, "You know, the company anniversary party is this weekend. Well, we're allowed to bring family. I was thinking of just going by myself, but what do you think?" Rachel's face lit up when she heard this. "Oh, really? I'd love to meet the people you work with and see what your workplace is like. Let's go together." Seeing Rachel's carefree smile, I felt a moment of excitement about the upcoming party. However, Johnny's smug grin quickly flashed through my mind. Hoping nothing would happen to hurt Rachel, I prepared for the weekend. On the day of the party, I dressed in my usual suit, and Rachel wore a dress she had pulled out for the occasion. We headed to the hotel where the party was being held and checked in at the reception. Rachel was delighted by the flowers and beautiful decorations in the venue. She was also looking forward to the meal, and I hoped the evening would pass peacefully. But that hope was shattered by Johnny. "Hey Tom, there you are." Johnny spotted me and jogged over, looking at Rachel. "Is that your parent next to you? Don't bring your mom to a company party." He had already seen Rachel's photo, so there was no way he could make that mistake. Rachel, however, didn't seem to catch Johnny's meanness and responded with a smile. "No, I'm his wife," Rachel said. "Thank you for always taking care of my husband. I used to work in Cambodia and got a lot of sun, so I look older than my age, don't I?" When Rachel said that, Johnny sarcastically agreed. "You sure do." Rachel didn't seem to be bothered by Johnny's response, but Johnny didn't like that. Finally, he said something outrageous. "Oh, you're his wife? My apologies. I heard you recently got married, but at your age, having children must be difficult. Tom said he likes kids, but when you marry at that age, you have to give up on some things." Rachel was visibly hurt. After forcing a smile, she looked down. I couldn't stand to watch any longer, so I looked at the seating chart to leave the scene. "Well, we'll be going now. Thank you for tonight." Johnny didn't let me leave, though, and continued with his usual relentless insults. "By the way, this party is only for spouses and kids, right? Hope there won't be any misunderstandings. Johnny was implying that Rachel and I looked like mother and son. I lost my temper and raised my voice at him. This is my wife. How many times do I have to tell you? The room went silent, and I could feel all eyes on us. Rachel, humiliated and hurt, kept her head down. Johnny, initially shocked by my outburst, didn't like being yelled at by a subordinate. He said to me in a low voice, "Who do you think you're talking to? You seem to lack basic social etiquette. Someone like you is a problem here. Go home." Still fuming, I snapped back at Johnny. "I can't stay in a place this unpleasant either. Excuse me." Taking Rachel's hand, I said, "Let's go," and we walked towards the exit. I could feel the eyes of the people in the room on us as we left. As we walked, feeling a mix of anger and embarrassment, I heard hurried footsteps behind us. When I turned around, I saw our colleague James running towards us, his face tense. Beside him was a man who looked around 60 years old. Seeing James's face, I stopped, intending to say something before leaving. "Rachel, is that you?" Rachel, who had been looking down, slowly lifted her head at the sound of her name. "Is that you, Mike?" The man called Mike had apparently come with James after hearing the commotion. He had been watching from a distance but rushed over when he realized the woman with her head down was Rachel. "Rachel, who is this man?" I asked. James started to explain, but Johnny cut him off with a condescending look. Johnny began to speak as if to enlighten us ignorant folks. "This is Mike Smith. He's one of our major clients, and without him, our company wouldn't survive. Mike, I deeply apologize for the rudeness of my subordinate. I had no idea he was such an important figure." I instinctively straightened up, but I still didn't know how Mike was connected to Rachel. I looked at Rachel, and she uttered shocking words. "It's been a long time, brother." Both Johnny and I were stunned at the word brother. James seemed to have already known, as he mentioned earlier that Rachel resembled his sister. That's probably why, after overhearing our conversation and seeing us leave, he ran after us, pale-faced. But Johnny looked even paler than James, and for good reason. Since we hadn't had a wedding ceremony, our families had never gathered together, and I had never heard that Rachel had a brother. Besides, Mike seemed much older than Rachel. When I looked at Rachel for an explanation, she began to speak about her past. I had met Rachel's parents directly, but it turned out that her mother was actually her father's second wife. Rachel's father had lost his first wife to illness, and they had a son who was already in elementary school at that time. That son was Mike. So, Mike and Rachel were half-siblings. Rachel and I have a big age gap, but she's my dear sister. "Hearing such awful things said about her makes my heart ache," Mike said. Johnny visibly shrank under Mike's intense gaze. I was just trying to communicate, you know. Tom, we talk like this all the time, right?" Johnny looked at me desperately, seeking support. But there was no way I would agree with him. Of course, in this case, he has deeply hurt Rachel. Such behavior is never acceptable. "It's true," I continued. "I've heard those kinds of comments from Johnny regularly. Every time, I've felt uncomfortable, but I've managed to endure it. If you ask other employees, they'll tell you the same thing. Johnny's behavior is beyond unacceptable." Hey, what's with the sudden turn? Guys make dumb jokes like that all the time. Johnny tried to justify himself, but Mike cut him off. "Do you not know how to communicate properly? How can I trust a company where someone like you is in management? This also relates to compliance issues." Hearing this, James started sweating. Johnny, even more flustered, desperately tried to defend himself. "I deeply apologize for causing any discomfort. I assure you there are no issues with our company's culture. You can trust us. I have no intention of listening to someone who casually makes such comments." Mike turned his attention to James as he said that sharply. "Let me be clear. Your employee just made problematic remarks right in front of me. How you handle this situation will determine whether I can trust your company or not." It was clear that Mike was demanding severe punishment for John. Indeed, any company that sweeps such incidents under the rug is bound to decline eventually. Although I hadn't reported Johnny's behavior myself, I hoped James would take decisive action. Just as James was hesitating, a cheerful voice interrupted. "What's going on here?" A stylish woman walked up to Johnny and linked arms with him. As soon as I saw her face, I knew who she was: Johnny's wife. Normally, Johnny would be bragging to me about his wife, but this was clearly not the right moment for that. Instead, Johnny looked visibly annoyed by her presence. "Are these the people you were talking about? The couple with the big age gap?" She started to say something, looking at us with a mocking expression. "Just shut up and go over there," Johnny shouted at her. I could easily imagine them at home, making fun of us and using us as fodder for their jokes over drinks. The image came to mind effortlessly. After Johnny's wife left, James cleared his throat to get our attention. "Mike is right. We need to clarify the facts and proceed with an investigation that could lead to disciplinary dismissal." James wiped the sweat from his forehead as he said that. Hearing this, Mike nodded slowly. "If your company handles misconduct as seriously, I can trust you moving forward. Since this involves my family, I would appreciate a follow-up report," Mike continued. "I apologize, but I'll be leaving now," he added. Then he headed toward the exit, his posture showing that he was trying hard to control his anger. James hurriedly followed him to the exit, while Johnny watched in shock. In the end, Rachel and I also left the party and decided to have dinner at another hotel. Since we had dressed up for the occasion, we thought we might as well enjoy a nice meal instead of heading straight home. As we toasted with our drinks, I spoke to Rachel. "I'm sorry for ruining your night. I enjoy my job, but that guy really causes me problems." When I apologized, Rachel shook her head apologetically. "I'm sorry too. I'm sure I've made you feel ashamed because of me." I had never seen Rachel, usually so cheerful, blame herself like this. It doesn't matter what others say. I fell for your smile and your inner self. Rachel finally smiled and said, "Thank you." Then I asked her something that had been on my mind. "By the way, you seemed quite close to Mike, but I've never heard you talk about him. Can you tell me more about you two?" "Sure. I'm sorry I never mentioned it." It's not that I wanted to hide it. Rachel began to talk about her feelings. By the time Rachel was old enough to remember, Mike was already in high school. When she was told that Mike was her half-brother, Rachel felt as if her mother only loved her. Rachel had always felt guilty about Mike, and because she admired him, thought it would be better for her to stay away from him. That's why she decided from a young age that she would work overseas in the future. Since she started working overseas, Rachel hardly ever returned to the U.S., and she couldn't even remember the last time she saw Mike. I was genuinely surprised to hear this. But Mike really cares about you, Rachel. Maybe you don't need to be so hard on yourself for his sake. Rachel thought for a moment and then said, "You're right." She took a sip from her glass. The week after the party, an internal consultation office and an investigation committee were established to address the issue with Johnny. The committee quickly uncovered Johnny's previous misconduct through interviews. Within a few months, Johnny stopped coming to work without notice, likely having been either fired or resigned voluntarily. Oddly enough, I felt a bit sorry for him. But I reminded myself that I wasn't the only one he had wronged, and he deserved the consequences. I hoped he would learn from his mistakes at his next job. With Johnny gone, I have been able to work under a new boss without much stress. My relationship with Rachel remains strong, and I'm very satisfied both personally and professionally. One day, while we were enjoying our usual routine, Rachel came to me with a proposal. "We've had dinner with my parents, but would you like to have dinner with my brother Mike?" I readily agreed to Rachel's suggestion. I had been curious about how their relationship had developed, but I hadn't asked. Since Rachel was ready to have dinner with him, She must have come to terms with everything. I looked forward to the day when the three of us would have dinner together. A few weeks later, the dinner happened. Thank you for today. My name is Tom Wilson. Thank you for coming. Let's keep it casual today, Mike said with a smile as he turned to Rachel. I was surprised when I heard Mike ask, I was surprised when I heard you suddenly went overseas for work and lost contact. Why do you always run away? Prompted by Mike's question, Rachel shared the feelings she had once confided in me, how it felt to suddenly have a brother, how she felt like all her mother's love was directed only at her, making her feel guilty, and how she decided to leave because she remembered Mike being unhappy at home. Mike listened intently and finally smiled. Maybe it was just adolescent awkwardness. Sure, there were times I didn't handle things maturely, but I was happy to have a sister. That feeling has never changed. Plus, Mom showed me love even though I wasn't her biological son. Hearing those words, Rachel looked relieved. Most importantly, we're each other's only siblings. Let's work together from now on, and Tom, as my relative, I'm counting on you too. We raised our glasses again, confirming our bond, and toasted once more.